And so if you are joining me, I am going to give everybody a minute to pop in because listen, the devil be working, don't he? And it ain't the devil. I'm not even gonna say that. It's me. It's me. It's me. It's me. It's me. Right? It's me because somehow I always forget. But what I will say is I'm glad to have be here because let me tell you something. When I was saying in the other video, delusion is real. Delusion is real. Now, I know for a fact that I've been setting up my room for an hour to make sure that I was prepared for this live. And then, just like I do on every Sunday, but sure enough, something always happened. And in my mind, I was going to get there on time, right? I was going to start this live on time. And now that I'm sitting here thinking about this, as I'm waiting on people to come in or to come back into the room, it made me think about what happened today as I got ready to go to church as well. I woke up at 7:30, 8 o'clock today. Church for me starts at 11. Now, typically, I'll get there at 11:30. It just is what it is. I get there 11:30 for my own personal reasons. Now, in saying that, today I was dressed by 10:30. I had did whatever caption I was going to do. I had did whatever, reels I was going to create. I had did all the things. Then I look up all of a sudden and it's time to go. And just as I look up when it's time to go, I realize that I can't find my keys. And when I say I can't find my keys, I mean, granted, I have two sets of keys to my vehicles, right? But I needed the one specifically that had all the keys on there. And I needed the set of keys specifically that was going to get me back in the house, because if not, then I would have had to switch keys around, or I would have had to have taken two sets. And I didn't want to do that because then I might forget to change them back later. So I'm looking for my keys, and can't find my keys anywhere to be able to get in my vehicle. So what I did was I was like, okay, so I went ahead and grabbed the last set of keys that I had for the vehicle. But at the same time, by this time, I have wasted so much time to the time that I thought I was going to have to get to church early. It was no longer as such. Like literally, it was no longer as such. In other words, I, I wasn't on time. So that time that I thought I was going to get there early, it went out the window. Why? Because I couldn't find my keys. And so I had to go back, or should I say, I had to go and wait until I came home, and then go back through everything that I had done in terms of tracing my steps. Okay. And once I traced my steps and all that, then I was able to find where my keys were. Okay. And lo and behold, they were in my robe. Okay, my robe pocket. And the reason why they was in my robe pocket was because I had went to the car earlier in order to get something out of the vehicle. And when I went to go get something out of the vehicle, I put my keys down in my robe and I forgot they was in there. Y'all see where I'm going with the story? And so it almost made me think about how we are always where we are supposed to be at, no matter what. We are always where we're supposed to be at, no matter what. Now, this has nothing to do with the subject today in terms of directly, because today we are talking about no contact, but it does have something to do with what brought you here and how you found this particular live, or how you found this particular viewing. If you come after the live, you are always exactly where you're supposed to be at. And what you can't do is you can't rush things. So although I was trying to rush the process and say, oh my God, I think I got time. I got enough time to start my live on time. I got enough time to get on church. And I look up and the time was gone before I knew it. And it's like, where did the time go? Right. And although we say we can't rush time, at the same time, we can't waste time. So we always have to be okay, moving in the direction of what is intended for us. And so when I think about today, about this whole no contact, parents to children and children to parents, I made sure that I set my intention very much so that I did not speak from a place of my own experience currently. See, here at Hood Parenting, if this is your first time watching me, by the way, hello, I'm Yashika Foster. When I think about the things that I've done, a lot of times I speak from a place of what has happened in the past. And I speak from a place of what has happened in the past because I believe that you are able to teach from a scar better than you are from a wound. Because see, when you have a scar, that means that it's already healed. That means that you treated it, you nurtured it, you care for it, you care for that wound, and now it is healed, and now it's a scar, right? So now you can tell how you were able to heal that particular wound. But when you're teaching from a wound, sometimes you're doing what you need to do. You're nurturing it. You're catering to it. You're putting up whatever needs to be done on it. You're applying the dressing. You whatever needs to be done to keep that wound protected so that it won't get infected, so that anything won't happen. Well, it get worse. You want it to get better, but at the same time, you really can't tell people how it turned out until it's completely healed. Unfortunately, I would say that when it comes to certain things in life, we only can apply that method in certain ways because this is what I know about parenting and raising children. For me personally, I have different children from I have children from different generations. And when I say different generations, it's like this. I have my youngest daughter, my youngest daughter is 11. So she is my bonus adopted daughter. She's my adopted daughter. And I talk about it all the time. She's my cousin by birth, but she's my adopted daughter. She's 11. My 30-year-old son is going to be raised different than I raised my 11-year-old daughter. Not only am I in a different space, but I've also matured, or shall I say, I see things differently. Because I think that we as parents, we always want to do things better than other things. I think real true parents, and when I talk about this, and that's why I say with this particular subject, I wanted to make sure that I was particular about my notes because, like I said, it's easier to heal from a scar than it is from a wound because a wound is still open, whereas that a scar is healed. And so when I think about parenting and things like that, it's like I have to speak from a place of experience and this because see, here's the thing. No two children are the same. No matter what you do, you can have several children with the same partner and they will not be the same. They could be identical twins and they will still be different because everybody is different. Everybody processes things different. But I also know that we as parents, we have to make sure that we adjust because it's easier for us to adjust to our kids than our kids to adjust to us because we're the teachers. We're like every child. It's like saying every child has to learn this way. Every child doesn't. And I'm not saying that many things can't be true at one time because there is. And that's why I say before I started this live, I wanted to make sure that I really, really got into I wanted to make sure that I express both sides. And so first thing I wanted to do is start with the truth. And I have notes here because again, because I'm experiencing this myself, there's no one size fit all. There's never a one size fit all. And I want you guys to remember that many things can be true at one time. Right? We could acknowledge something over here, but it doesn't negate the fact that this is happening. In other words, what I mean by that, and I'm going to get into it on these notes, and what I mean by that is this. It's like me saying to my adopted daughter, right? Well, you should be grateful because if it wasn't for me, so if I'm this way sometimes, then, and that's not how it goes because she can feel a certain kind of way when it comes to looking for her biological parents. In other words, I can't tell her, well, why would you want to go look for your parents? You got a good life here. Don't do that. Don't do that. Because guess what? That's still something she has to do for herself if that's what she desires. It doesn't negate that her life here is good. It doesn't take away that she has love here. It doesn't take away anything. All it is that she has something within that she still has to satisfy. And so what I know about parenting is that a lot of what we do or a lot of things that we experience, we cannot take it personal because people, especially our children, are not machines. It's not one of those things where you input and you output, right? Hoping for the best. No, because that's not how genetics work. Genetics can go way back in generations. Okay. Way back. It's not something you see physically all the time. It's not okay, you got a certain kind of eyes because your grandfather, your grandmother got those eyes. No, sometimes it can be you are carrying a wound that been passed down. Why? Because it's a learned behavior a lot of times. And so you're carrying that. And so every child sees things differently. And so it's not an input output. So when we talk about start with the truth, when we talk about why people have the no contact, let me tell you how I got here. And just so you guys to know, while I take a pause, I'm drinking a tea by Yogi. It's called Positive Energy because I wanted to make sure that, this live, because again, like I said, this is something that is becoming a big issue and it hasn't really grown necessarily. It's just that now it's public, like so many things are, because we do have social media. But the other day, I had a conversation with someone kind of back to back talking about their child not having any contact with them. Now, this particular person was a friend. And then I ended up having a client that had the same situation. And it was one of those things where it was like it was coming at me from different ways and then I heard other conversations about it. And lo and behold, I'm strolling through Instagram or YouTube, and Oprah had a live that she did with an audience at her studio where the headline was no contact. And I will link that video somewhere in this comment or down below in the comments. But the comment was no contact, in that more and more of the new millennial or more and more kids are having no contact with their parents, or parents who are having no contact with their children. And so I guess because of the algorithms and me dealing with the area of parenting, it came up. But sure enough, I decided to take a look at it. And what I liked about it was she didn't have just one-sided, people. She didn't just have kids that weren't dealing with their parents. She also had kids that weren't dealing with their parents, parents that weren't dealing with their kids. She also had psychologists and therapists who have experienced things as like that. So they were speaking firsthand knowledge in addition to them having the education in it. So she had a very diverse group of personnel or panel that can give a lot of insight. And then on top of that, she had audience members that was a diverse group of people who had different experiences. And so you had a lot of different insights there and different perspective that was being given in the room. But all in all, it made me think about my own situation and about my oldest son and about his life, right? And so it's one of those things where I had my son at an early age. And when I say early age, in other words, I was an adult, but there's been earlier. 22 is when I had him, his father and I, and in my mind, he was planned. Well, what I do know about children is that just like anybody else, they process things the way they want to process things. And a lot of the things that I've asked my son, because the way I raised him was different than the way I raised my 22-year-old. Because it was a different time. A lot of it was different in terms of what I had been through, what I had experienced. And so not only that, but I had more of a healthy or a partner who was more like fit and doing the role of a father. And so with my second son and his dad, it was a little different. But yet I still had my oldest son in here, and now his father and I were living in two different households because we were divorced. There was a part of me that felt like I had to play both roles because I knew that his father wasn't in the house 24 hours. And therefore, there was something that he was going to miss. Right. And so I just remember like making sure that I tried to have open communications with him. But I also remember having that masculine energy to him as well as that feminine energy. Like, in other words, this is what I mean. I was his disciplinary and also his love giver. In other words, come on, let me hug on you, but you still screwed up. And so I realized that for me or for him, that he needed a little bit more gentle parenting. Now, am I saying that he would have turned out differently? No, I'm not saying any of that because again, many things can be true at one time. But what I can understand is his reasoning. Now, does it make it right? No. And like I said, throughout this whole video, I'm going to have a lot of caveats. And the reason being is because there is no one way to do anything. And the purpose of hood parenting is simple. I go off of my experience, and then I couple it up with my education, my master's in marriage and family counseling, my bachelor's in psychology, my lived experience through different types of family dynamics. I am a stepmother. I was a bonus mother. I was a second wife. I was a first wife. I came from a single parent home. I came from an absentee father home. I came from a young adult home, or excuse me, a teenage mother home. Like, I came from the streets of Detroit. Like, there's so many dynamics until I know the experience. But here's the thing, nobody has that time to be living all those experiences. So sometimes we have to make decisions on the resources, or shall I say, the information that we have. So here is where I give you my lived experience and also couple it with what book says, and then you make a decision. What I know is that when it comes to parenting, you cannot take one person's opinion and make it law when it comes to parenting your child. Uh-huh. And when I say that, I'm just not talking about you listen to one person. I'm talking about when we reach to our parents as well, and we say, okay, well, I'm going to try to raise my child just like my parents raised me, or whatever. Because why? Your child is not going to process things the same way you process things. So it might sound well, it might excuse me, it may brief well in theory, but it can't happen. It's not possible, because why? You don't know everything that was put down. You don't know the back root of parenting when it came to how your parents got to the conclusion with you. You can't really analyze how you were with a child. As a child, you don't really see how you were as a child until you have children of your own. Once you have children of your own, then you start to see how you were as a child. Then you can say, okay, now I see why my mother was like this. Now I understand why my mother said what she said, that wait till you have you start to understand things. You start to understand because, again, those children have your traits, but they also have everybody else's traits, but they still have your traits. They have your genes, they have your genetics, right? So they're going to be who they're going to be regardless. And so when it comes to parenting, we have to have as much information as we can from as many resources as we can so that we can make a decision. And sometimes, will we have the time? Absolutely not. Sometimes it is one of those things where we learn as we go, because there's no right or wrong way. You can have 2 or 3 kids raised in the same household, just like I said earlier. They will all take different paths in life. They will all turn out differently. And it doesn't matter about who the parents were, because, again, they can have the same parents or they can have all different parents. They're still going to turn out differently. Why? Because people process things differently. And so when we think about why people integrate the whole no contact with the parent, or parent say, okay, I'm not going to have any contact with my child. Let's start with why these things happen. So let's start with the truth. A lot of times this happens because of the fact that there's pain there. We all know that there's some type of pain there. And because there's pain there, it's not that that person have stopped caring or have stopped loving you. It's just that they have a pain that's overshadowing what they feel is loving on you. And nobody's to say that who's right or who's wrong. I'm just telling you why we get here, or how we get here, or how does this whole no contact usually starts. So when it happens is because people have a lot of emotional overload, and again, they feel unheard. They feel dismissed. They feel as if, you're not listening to me. They can see repeated patterns in things, like things that you knew that was done in your household, you're doing. One of the things that I know for a fact I used to ask my son was, I would ask him, did he feel like I loved him enough? Did I love you enough? Do you feel like I loved you enough? Did I show you enough love in terms of caring, in terms of emotional, maturity, talking to him and doing the things that I felt was my way of showing him love, hugging on him, talking to him, nurturing him, making sure he has the things, like all the things that we do as parents to show our children love. So his response to me was, there was nothing to compare it to. So he says, Mama, how would I know that? There's nothing to compare it to. And so when he said that to me, and then I thought about the things that he does when he goes months without any contact, I had to think about that. Well, if there's nothing to compare it to, then it might be something that he has to discover on his own. In other words, no matter what I've done or didn't do, if he still doesn't have a trajectory about what things supposed to be or how things supposed to be, then I can't fill that in for him either. That's something that you learn through self-discovery, right? Because see, here's the thing about parenting. We as parents, we only can teach our kids as much as our capacity is. And a lot of what we experience and a lot of what we go through, it's trial and error. And so a lot of times we'll try to tell our kids, hey, don't do this way because when you do it this way, this will happen. And we don't really tell them the whole eaches. We don't break it all the way down to the lowest denominator because who got time for all that? Our thing is just don't do it. Just don't do it because I said so. That's it, because I said so. And I know that's how my mother raised me. And so when it came to my kids, I wanted them to be able to talk to me about certain things. Now, some people would say that's good or bad because then the opinions become too much. But what I do know is that I did what I felt what needs to be done. Now, here's the thing. There's not always times that we have as parents to process what our kid is saying because why? A lot of us are parenting from survival mode. And I know for a fact that me, when it came to my oldest son, I was parenting him out of survival mode, which meant that I know that I have to do these things over here, but I also know that I have to do these things over here because why? I don't want to go back to the hood. I don't want us to go back to where I started from. I got us up out of Detroit, meaning that he was not even born in where I'm from. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when you're from there, it's a different environment than when you move there and you can see the beauty in it. Because when you're in the trenches of it, it's hard to see it because there's so much cloud around you. There's so much smoke around you. So for me, I needed to get him out of the environment. If I had kids at any point, I needed to get them out of that environment. And so once I got him out of that environment, it's like, how do I make sure that I don't get them back into that environment? And so when he talks to me about certain things, because one of his gripes is, well, mom wasn't there enough. He says, well, you raised us in a hotel. I was military, so we spent a lot of time in hotels. And I thought about that. Now, there's a part of me that says to that, well, how dare you? Because a hotel, like, dude, that means you were traveling. That means that you were doing fun things. But at the same time, right, because many things can be true at one time, it also meant that he felt unstable. There's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing I can do about how he felt if he felt unstable because we were military. Therefore, we were bouncing from place to place to place. And that was just what it was. I cannot take away from his experience. And so all I can tell him is when you have children, I hope that you can give them those things that you felt like you've missed. Now, this isn't me, like negating his issues or trying to downplay him. It's like, no, I can't go back and change it. All I can tell you is that there was sacrifices to be made. And as parents, that's where we have to say, okay, did I do the best that I can in terms of my children? And when it comes to trying to make sure that certain things happen, like, again, you don't want to say, well, I did this and I did that. But I tell my sons these things, for example, you guys got through college without any bills. That's something that I had to work for y'all to be able to have. And did it mean that I had spent less time with you all to do it? Absolutely. However, if I had not done that, then we will be arguing about something else. So I acknowledge how you feel and I take that into consideration. But what I also know is that depending on the child, everything is not the same. Give an example. My oldest son feels as though I was away more with him and that he feels like, hey, we were raised in a hotel, like you were never home because I would leave in the dark time and come back in the dark time. Okay. It was just that simple. I would leave at night and come back at night. By the time I left in the morning time, the sun wasn't even up yet. By the time he saw me in the evening time, the sun was down. So I get it. Now, my 11-year-old, soon to be 12-year-old, I'm retired. I'm at home every day with her. However, that's a problem for her. hmm That's a problem for her. She looks at me like, why are you always here? Why are you always here? You don't take no breaks. You don't go nowhere. You don't go to work. You don't do nothing. Because when she goes to school, I'm here. When she comes home from school, I'm here. In between that, I'm here. So in her mind, you need to be gone sometime so I can have this house to myself sometime. Because she's at that age where I can run to the store up the street and she okay. So it's one of those things where, again, different children require different things because just like anybody else, there's a time where when I was young, for example, I remember I used to have like, I have curly hair. We go out and get relaxers. Why? Because we wanted straight hair. People who had curly hair went out and got, people who had straight hair went out and got perms, right? Because they call them perms, jerry curls, whatever, so they can have curly hair, right? So what I'm saying to you is that just like everybody wants something different, that's the way children are. And so as parents, as long as we know that we are doing the things that we supposed to do. Now again, there's no one size fit all in anything to include parenting. I am talking to the parents that know that they have done right, or shall I say, have done as biblically possible as you can do when it comes to raising your children. Okay, those ones who have no contact, right? And so when we talk about that and why does it happen, again, we talk about feeling unheard on both sides. Okay, the parents might feel unheard with the child might feel unheard with the parents. Then, of course, you have guilt, you have shame, and sometimes you have trauma in that relationship. And the trauma, we're not talking about I'm not talking about extreme trauma because trauma levels are different to everybody. What one person deem as trauma, another person may not. I know people who have been bitten by a dog when they were kids. And so as adults, they don't care if it's a little bitty chihuahua. They are just all right afraid of a dog because why? It's trauma from them. So they don't care if they're a 200-pound person and that little chihuahua weighs 6 pounds. They don't care about none of that. Trauma is there. So again, people have different levels of how they process things. And so how it ends up happening and why it gets to a no contact, trauma, things that are unresolved or people needing space to regroup or whatever, right? There's different reasons. There's no one reason. Now, excuse me, when we talk about parents, why do parents sometimes decide, okay, I am going to cut my child off, or should I say, develop this whole no contact anymore, right? First, sometimes let's be clear. We as parents feel like we have unlimited access to our children, regardless, right? We feel as though, excuse me. Okay, that's the thing about live. My voice gets cracky after a while. We feel as though we have unlimited access to our children. And that's not always the case because sometimes we can be overwhelming to our kids. I know I am. My son tells me I stress him out. My son tells me in a lot of ways that I stress him out. Now, I stress him out and I know this, but I also stress him out because I hold him accountable. If he's around me and I know he's half-assed in life, I'm going to tell him about it. Why? Because like I tell him, I know what type of upbringing you had. I know nothing is perfect and I know you're going to have problems or you see things differently. But you cannot sit and stuck because of something that happened to you when you were 3 or 4. Excuse me. And that's what happens with a lot of people when it comes to parenting, when it comes to the perspective. They'll feel like I can't do this because of this. And so when it comes to parents and how we sometimes lose perspective because we feel like we have unlimited access to our kids and we don't. They have to process they things themselves too. And sometimes that means a space from them. Another thing, we as parents sometimes we are resistance to accountability. Again, because we'll look at them and feel, well, I did this and you should be grateful because I didn't have to do this. Like when I gave the example about my adopted daughter. I can't sit here and tell her, well, why would you want, if she decides when she's older that she wants to find her biological parents, I can't tell her, why would you do this to me? Why would you go find your parents? It's not about me. It's about what she needs in her life. And so for me, I have to take accountability for that. In other words, that's something she needs. I can't sit up here and make it about me because it's not about me. And then on top of that, when it comes to the grief or the unmet expectations of parenting, what that means is simple. We as parents sometimes look at our kids and we feel, well, these things were put into you. I gave you these things. So because of that, you should be this person. No, that's not how anything works. So no, that's not how anything works. So this live is excuse me, y'all. I'm really starting to have a coughing fit for whatever reason. Okay. But when we talk about the parents, that's the perspective of the parents. Let me drink tea. Golly, it smell like I'm coughing like a mm. Now, from a child's perspective, a lot of times the reason why a child will have a no contact with the parent is because that child feels misunderstood or emotionally unsafe. And what that means when they say emotionally unsafe, it's like, again, with the example with my daughter. If she felt that she wouldn't be able to come to me and say, hey, mom, I want to be able to go and look for my biological parents. If she feels as though I'm going to scold her or try to say, well, why would you do that? Or take it personally, that's giving her a feeling of um, emotional instability. In other words, she doesn't feel safe coming to talk to me about her feelings and her emotions, right? And so a lot of times, if a child is experiencing this with a parent, in order for them to be okay, they'll just have no contact to say, okay, because I have to figure out a way to get this to my parent. So if I feel that the only way they can hear me is by me removing myself out of their lives, then that's what I'll do. Now, these things that I'm giving you, these examples from a parent's perspective or from a child's perspective, this is not no one size fit all. And this is not no one of those things that any of these things are, well, this is the reason why it's justified. No, all I'm saying is that these are reasons why parents will do a no contact and reasons why children do no contact. Now, when we talk about the space, when we talk about space or having space between that person, whether it's the parent that initiates it or the child that initiates it, we have to remember that space is not rejection. Just because someone tells you I need space, they're not rejecting you. They're not saying that I don't love you, right? Because what I know about love is people feel like because this person done this to me that the love automatically leaves, especially when you're talking about a parent or a child. That's not the case. That's not the case a lot of times, especially when you grew up with that person. Because often hear people say, well, although they did that, I still love you. I don't even know why we have to say that as a bonus. You can Two things can be true at the same time. I can be disappointed or I can be upset with you or not pleased with an action and it has nothing to do with my love for you. Right? Two things can occupy one space. It's not saying that I hate you. No, I'm just simply saying that I'm angry or I'm upset about this or I have a distaste for something you've done, and because of it, I'm not going to be my pleasant self towards you, or should I say, I'm not going to always welcome you with open arms while we're going through this because why? I still feel some kind of way. So it doesn't mean that just because I need space that I'm rejecting you. It just means I need space so that I can be able to heal and process what has happened. But people will take that and feel like, okay, well, what is this? No, sometimes they do. What I know about um, no contact is when we're up in that when people are having no contact with another, and this is something that parents will do. They will do this whole, well, you know, what if something happened to me? right? We got to stop guilt tripping our kids. I know people that does that personally. They'll be like, they know I'm getting older and they shouldn't be doing this. No, you have to give them time to process, because here's the thing. Just because we are parents, it does not mean that everything we've done is right. It doesn't. I'm not saying that whether or not it's justified or was justified. That's not what the argument is here. All I'm saying, we're talking about right or wrong. That's it. Just like when it comes to kids, like I tell my son, if you got into trouble for something, I wasn't just handing out ass whoopings. Okay. I wasn't just handing out punishments or taking your things from you or putting you where you couldn't go outside for 30 days. I wasn't just doing that because I just felt like I had too much of it in my system. No, you did something that caused a action or that caused a justifiable punishment. If you went out here and did something you didn't have no business doing, you're going to be in the house for 30 days. No bikes, no riding with your friends, no playing no video games, no nothing. So you wasn't a perfect child, like I'm not a perfect parent, and I don't expect you to be, and please don't expect me to be, because we're both here for the first time. And I mean that, and that's something that parents and children should consider. Both of you are here for the first time, which means both of you are here as parents. Even if you are being a parent for the first time, you are being a child for the first time. And then that parent is being a parent to you for the first time, said child. So in other words, everything about these situations are for the first time. There's no me before me that had my son before my son and they did it before and they left a cliff notebook to let me know how it was done. There was none of that. We're all doing this for the same time, for the first time, at the same time. There wasn't no let me get here first and check it out. Okay, let me go and raise a couple of other kids before I get to you to see how I'm gonna do. No, it wasn't none of that. There wasn't no practice round. Because even if there was children before that child, again, every child is different. Everybody processes things differently. And so when it comes to no contact or whatever, parents, get out of that whole guilt tripping your child and telling your child, well, I might do this or I might do that, or better yet, doing that whole you playing the victim. We have to, and when I say this, I'm not just talking about directly to the parents. And I want to make sure I say this. So when I'm giving these notes, I will say specifically for the parents or for the children, but the things that I'm giving us about the guilt trip and all that, it worked both ways, because I also know children who have children who will guilt trip their parents because their parents don't do what they want them to do. And so they'll keep the grandkids away from the parents, or they'll keep whatever, or that child will stay away from that parent because they're trying to guilt trip them because that parent didn't do what that child wanted them to do. So guilt tripping and all these things that I'm talking about work both ways. It works both ways. Okay. Also, when we are in the concept of no contact, we're like, okay, well, what do we do? This is a time for you to reflect. When you are in a situation with a no contact with your child, or you are the child, there's no contact with your parents or your siblings or your extended family, whatever, these are the times for you to reflect. And not only that, but if there's something that you are trying to work through or heal from, you have to consider a plan. In other words, if it's something that hurt you that was said, what is your plan to get yourself to a better place? Do you need to talk to somebody else? Do you need therapy? Do you need to journal about it or write it out? Do you need to go and go to the ocean and take a vacation? Like, what are you going to do to make sure you're good so that when you and that person do come back together, you are free and clear and you're talking from a place of a wound, not a scar. Because see, sometimes we have a tendency to take what we've been through and mix it up with a situation. This is kids and parents, because I know for a fact that kids will do that. They will take their life and what they're going through right now and blame their parents for it because of something that happened 10 years ago. So I'm not so what I'm saying is that there's no one size fit all in none of this. Everybody at the end of the day have to take accountability, especially when you're talking about adult children. And this is what I want to make sure I'm talking about. We're not talking about kids. We're talking about adult children dealing with adult parents. That's what we're talking about. Adult children dealing with adult parents that has no contact. That's what we're talking about. Okay, people who are of the age of 18 or above, they can make decisions for themselves because they're adults. So when we talk about that, we have to make sure that while we are in this stage, What are we doing to make sure that we are better? What are we doing to make sure that when that person and I come back together, if you come back together, right? Because just because it don't happen when you want it to, that don't mean it doesn't happen. It's not going to happen, right? So when you come back together, right, you will be able to come from a place of better understanding. And not only that, but while you are in the no contact area, make sure that everybody respects one another's boundaries. If there's something you're saying, well, I don't want anything to do with this person for this reason, you got to respect their boundaries. You can't force yourself on them. And I know as hard as it may be, you can't. Because I even know, and when I say this subject is has so many layers to it, it really does. Because again, we're talking about people who have what we would consider regular lives. We're not talking about the children who have, or the parents who have, become on this or doing this, and or they have done this, or they have abuses. We're not talking about those parents. We're talking about the regular ones who have did things as close to possible in terms of biblical, when it comes to being a parent and being a child, and vice versa, right? When we talk about hope, not a fantasy, reconnection is possible. So I know a lot of times we'll look at that and say, well, it's been 2 and 3 years since I talked to my so and so or whatever, but reconnection is possible. But what it does take is a lot of healing, and it's going to take a lot of tears, especially depending on how long it's been, or what do you fell over from? What do you thought about, right? But I'm talking about if these are average things, or when I say average, I'm talking, excuse me, when I say average, I'm not talking about, I don't mean the word average. I mean normal things. Like, you said something that offended me. Or my parent, wouldn't give me a loan that I wanted. So I'm not talking to them. Those type of things, right? Eventually those people will come back around. You have to give them time. You have to give them time and the space that they need, because again, reconnection is possible. Okay. But only with change and not pressure. You can't force anybody to say, well, you know what, you need to talk to me, you need to come over here. You can't guilt trip them into it. You can't do any of those things. You can't, you know, it's a lot. But what I do know is that this thing is growing in terms of, people. And before I start to talk about more of my day to day or anything like that, I just wanted to kind of like lay it out in terms of what this whole no contact is from a parent's perspective and a child's perspective. And at the end of the day, everybody just got hurt feelings. And so when a young adult gets up to an age, a lot of times they feel that they have more of a voice. And a lot of times they feel like their parent is not looking at them through the eyes or looking at them as an adult. They're still seeing them as a child. And so sometimes that child will put up those boundaries because they want to be looked at as an adult and not a child. But then there will be instances where that child will revert back to that childlike behavior instead of that adult childlike behavior. And so it puts the parents back in that position. Well, okay, this is my child and not an adult. Okay. And so it's one of those things where it goes round and round in circles, round and round in circles. And that's why it's important to establish healthy boundaries. It's important to talk through situations. And if space is needed, take the space that's needed. And if the space is longer than you want it to be, then that's something that you're going to have to work through. Now, like I say to my son, and this is on everything, don't expect my door to be a revolving door for you to come in and come out when you want to. Because when you're ready to deal with me, or you call me after 2 or 3 months, I may not be in a mood to talk to you. So in other words, regardless of who we are, whether we are the parent in the situation or we are the adult child in the situation, treat people the way you want them to be treated. Because like I said, there comes a time in your life, whether you are an adult that eventually have children or you have children of your own, the things that you do, you will see them again. So you have to be careful about the choices that you make, especially when it comes to parenting. I tell people all the time, when it comes to my mom, my mother may not have been the best parent in the world. I don't know. To me, she was. Now, did she do things that probably would have put her in jail? You got doggone right she did. You show enough right. Show enough right. She did things to us that probably would have put her in jail. Okay, and by today's standards. But at the same time, is that what I needed? Is that what my brother needed? And I'm not justifying anything. All I'm saying is that she raised us with what she had and what she knew and with the tools that she had working with. And when you have more, you can do better. When you know better, you do better. And so that's why there's platforms like this, like Hood Parenting Live and other things that you can go to get as much information as you can. Because again, when it comes to this thing called parenting, there is no one size fit all. There's not. There's no one size fit all in parenting and when it comes to your children because every child is different. We just have to remember that we are the parents, and that's it. We are the parent, and we have to be accountable. And being a parent also means being a leader. Being a leader means we are accountable for our actions because many things can be true at one time. One thing being true does not negate or take away from anything over here. It does. If you tell me that you know you did this, I did. It doesn't make the fact that I did these things over here better. No, regardless of why I did these things, they were still done. And if that person feels some kind of way about it, then they feel some kind of way about it. So that's what we talk about it and then say, okay, now what? Now what? Now where do we go from here? But us as adults and as the parents, we have to stay just that and we have to behave as that. And sometimes that means us taking the high road. Sometimes that means us just saying, hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. How can I make it better? And that's it. Because they're our kids, right? Like I said, there's no right or wrong answer to none of this. But what I do know is that through talking, through conversation, through healing by setting intentions, and just plain on loving on each other, we can work this thing out because we can't keep on repeating the same things that we've done in other generations. I'm hoping for a different outcome because I don't see that happening because we're going to get the same outcome. And so, listen, I don't know who this is for, but I knew that if I kept on hearing this message about the whole no contact and I'm hearing it, then I knew I had to talk about it. And so hopefully I'll keep this video up because I didn't cough so much and now it's over. Now that I didn't cool down and everything. And so hopefully I'll keep this video up. And so if you have any additional comments or something you want to talk about, go ahead and comment below in this video and I will respond back to it or I will make a whole nother video. And this is your first time watching me here on this platform, thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so when I post another video, you will be the first to know. Thank you so much for joining me on this Hood Parenting Lab, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye. Happy Sunday.